like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio, radio with bite.
Hello and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. Tonight's topic is Mary Koss and the American Rape Machine. As always, I'm your host, Allison Tiemann, otherwise known as Typhon Blue, and with me is my stalwart co-host, Hannah Wallen. Karen Strawn is wrangling carpet or moving or doing something with pistons and duct tape. She'll be joining us later if she can make time. Until then, she's dead to us. Dead. Jim Doyle, otherwise known as Ginkgo, my co-blogger at Gender Attic, will be joining us later. You can find a link to our blog, Gender Attic, in the show notes. And we have a special guest host today, Janet Bloomfield, better known as Judgy Bitch. Judgy Bitch, say hello.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Janet Bloomfield blogs at judgybitch.com. Janet is here to tell you all that you don't know shit. Find Judgy Bitch's blog in the show notes. Speaking of not knowing shit, if you want our deplorable, vile message of equality that includes everyone in the equation, not just women, to reach a larger audience, please go to our website and donate, or click on the link in the show notes. It doesn't have to be much. It can be just a donation of $5. Every single bit helps us to spread our evil further, like the devil's peanut butter on the bread of the human soul. So go donate. Evil doesn't spread itself, you goddamn slackers. We've even set up a Bitcoin donation option on our site at honeybadgerbrigade.com. Use your creepy cryptocurrency to help us creep our corruption further into the public consciousness. But before we get into our show topic, here's some men's rights news. Hannah, take it away.
The UK government has committed £500,000 over the next financial year to provide services like advice and counseling to help male victims who previously have not had access to services. It's a drop in the bucket compared to female survivors, but maybe the UK can commit some of that to changing UK law to recognize that women can rape men. The link is in the show notes. Canada comes one step closer to equality in custody for both mothers and fathers. MP Velicott's Equal Shared Parenting Bill C-560 has been ruled votable by the Canadian House of Commons. Please follow the link in the show notes to find out how you can help support this bill and bring justice to Canadian families. The Office of British Columbia's Information and Privacy Commissioner Elizabeth Denham recently published a request for public submissions to her investigation into the use of police information checks. These checks can be requested by prospective employers evaluating job candidates, and the information provided in them can include unsubstantiated accusations, mental health information, and anything else the police have on file regarding the individual. This can result in information damaging to the reputation of the individual, but which the individual has no chance to contest, being passed from police to prospective employers. The investigation is focused on whether these checks and their common use violates privacy rights as laid out in Canada's Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. You guys have long names for your bills. And the Personal Information Protection Act. You guys are worse than the United States. A link to the request can be found under the featured content listing on the website for the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, which is linked in the show notes. Back to you, Allison.
Thanks, Hannah. And our bills are excessively long and difficult to pronounce, too difficult to say. Anyway, before we get into the show, and the show topic again is Mary Koss and the American Rape Machine, we're going to do something a bit different today. Today we're going to ask you guys listening in the audience to go to the link in the show notes titled Men's Rights versus Feminist Rape Culture Explained Using Puzzle Pieces. Click on that link and watch the video. In the meantime, we'll play some music. So go to the link, Men's Rights versus Feminist Rape Culture Explained Using Puzzle Pieces, in the show notes right now. If you've already watched the video, then go donate or watch it again or call in. The number is, again, 1-310-388-9709. But please do watch the video because it's going to be very pertinent to the discussion that takes place on this radio show after we finished listening to the music. Now here's Dan Mason with Slow Down. And we're back. That was If I Only Had a V. And if you only had a V, you could rape, and Mary Koss would say your victims were merely ambivalent about the sex that you graciously granted them. Once again, the show topic is Mary Koss and the American Rape Machine. Hopefully you've spent the music break watching the video Men's Rights versus Feminist Rape Culture Explained using puzzle pieces linked in the show notes, because that video gives a pretty good rundown of what we're dealing with in terms of government perfidy or government corruption when it comes to rape statistics. Essentially, Mary Koss, the originator of the 1 in 4 women will be raped in her lifetime, used the fact that these women answered yes to were you physically forced to have sex, and ignored the fact that many of them, 1/4 of the women who said yes to were you physically forced to have sex said no to I was raped. Actually, 3/4 said no to I was raped. So we are supposed to listen to Mary Koss when it comes to determining whether or not something is rape for women. But Mary Koss says that if men say they weren't raped, then they weren't raped. So it's the double standard that's really put into sharp relief in that video. The idea we're supposed to listen to women when they say, yeah, I was physically forced to have sex, but not men when they were saying that, the same thing. And we're using the excuse to not listen to men. We're using the excuse that men don't call it rape. Well, the majority of the women didn't call it rape either. So where do you draw the line? The reality is if you're going to use a behavioral definition to determine if something is rape, then you do it for both men and women. You don't just arbitrarily decide that we're going to go with the majority opinion of one sex on whether or not it was rape, but just ignore the majority opinion of the other sex on whether or not it was rape. Anyway, I'm going to hand the mic over to either Judgy or Hannah. Do either of you want to step up and say something about this situation? Yes, no, hello, are we there?
Oh, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead, Hannah.
Okay, Hannah, you go first.
You go ahead first. You go first.
We're so polite. Wait till the gloves come off and the claws come out, then we're going to strangle each other. No. You go first because I don't really know what I want to say, so I need something to build off of.
Oh, see, but when the gloves come out and the claws come out and everything, then we have to have video so we can charge for it. Isn't that what the other girls do? I don't think this is so arbitrary. I see feminism as an exploitation of proxy female victim status. And it's pretty consistent with other areas where I've seen them doing this. They exploit that status for political and social power, and they use it to push through laws that benefit women, but not necessarily genuinely benefit women. And they basically, are more of a breakdown of due process rights and create a greater ability for the use of legal supports built around the idea of supporting women that are very profitable. And this is really not any different. And here they're portraying rape as a crime committed as an attack on the individual's gender, not just the individual. And that's been a pretty consistent thing that feminists say, that rape is an attack on gender. It's a gendered crime. And so they're not going to want to allow for a large number of male victims at all, and much less male victims of female predators. Because if they start admitting there's female predators, then women can't also be the sweet, innocent, vulnerable people that they're claiming to try to protect. And they can't, if they admit that women are capable of being just as dangerous and being just as criminal, then they can't very well capitalize on the idea that the crime itself is gendered, especially not when women are committing it against men. So that's what I see as the reason why they've worked so hard to erase male victims of female perpetrators, not because they don't think that women can rape or that they don't think it's rape when it happens, but because feminists don't benefit from talking about it.
Okay, I'll just jump right into the boiling pot of oil here and say the reason that feminists, along with almost everybody else, don't think that males are victims of rape is because, in general, they're not. I mean, men can be raped, certainly. I mean, we just take the legal definition. And I think the legal definition is incredibly important. I am so interested in the consequences of that. But when we talk about men being victimized by female predators, I honestly think those men are in the minority. I mean, women shoot out of their league, definitely. The best victims, if you're going to shoot out of your league, are guys who are completely trashed out of their minds. Go to a bar, right? The hot football player or hockey star, medical student, or whatever have you, whatever his status is, that puts him out of your league. You go after these guys. It's absolutely predatory. I do not contest that at all. I just don't think that men are victimized by it. I think they wake up the next morning, it's coyote ugly. They're like, oh my God, how did I get here? I'd rather chew my arm off than wake this woman up. They head home, they get back to their apartment, they punch all their guy friends. They're like, dude, how could you do that to me? How could you let me operate with beer goggles on like that? All the guys think it's hilarious. Even if there's video of it, they think it's hilarious. They're simply not programmed culturally or biologically to perceive themselves as victims. Now, having said that, I still think there is enormous benefit to chasing down the idea that men are victimized by rape in a legal sense. Oh, I would love to see that. I would absolutely love to see that. I would love to see some fat, ugly girl up on charges of having date raped a star hockey player because he had his beer goggles on. But do I think that he was victimized by that? No, sorry. It's just not how men think, whether that's by biology or sociology. I don't know, kind of irrelevant. They just don't perceive themselves as victims in a situation in which they played 50% of the role. And personally, I'd like to see women move to that. Honey, you're 50% responsible for this, whatever situation you find yourself in. So it's not that I don't think men can be raped legally. I just don't think that it traumatizes them the same way that it might traumatize a woman. That's really, really problematic. So somebody just ripped that apart. But I mean, I really don't think that men can be raped and not be victims. It sounds counterintuitive, but I think that's true.
Well, it also depends on what you want to. The reality is that people respond very individually. For example, I was molested, and I make no bones about this. I was molested by a guy in his 30s when I was 12. I don't give a shit. I have never given a shit about it. It doesn't impact me in the slightest. However, I was molested by women, and that did bother me. So responses are very individual. Some things cannot bother you. Every person has a very individual response to this kind of thing. The law should not differ between men and women. And furthermore, there is a lot of socialization that men go through are I don't want to say subjected to, but there's a lot of socialization to accept any kind of sexual behavior from a woman. And if you don't, you're not a real man. And that has to have an effect on the situation, on men's responses to that. I mean, imagine if we lived in a world, and actually we did 2,000 years ago, where women were basically judged by by male sexuality or access to male sexuality, where male virility was seen as a benefit to women, and women were properly and supposed to desire men. The sexual spark went from man to woman. And in that era, it was inconceivable that a woman would say no. She wasn't expected to say no unless she had to uphold a chaste name, or she was trying to protect her uterus and only give birth to rightful heirs. Like, it was completely inconceivable that a woman would ever say no to the holy phallus. So rape in that time, it was essentially the same attitude that we have towards men. In fact, there was Christian women, when there was one of the innumerable times that barbarians were going to invade Rome, they were essentially told, if you didn't enjoy it, there was no sin committed. If you didn't enjoy it, the assumption is that a woman would enjoy being raped by a man, having sex with a man. The assumption was that the assumption was automatically women consented. And the reason why rape was all about property laws wasn't because women were property. It was because the only reason why a woman wouldn't consent to a man is if she was upholding the property of her husband or her father, which was her virginity and access to her womb. So it's, you can say that men aren't traumatized by being raped, but there's a huge amount of socialization going on. If we don't look at attitudes historically to this, and the fact that we didn't, historically people didn't think that women really could be raped. They could have their property stolen, which was use of their womb, but other than that, there wasn't really the psychological idea that women are horribly defiled by male sexuality. So, in that context, there's a huge component of socialization to this, and I agree that in some ways we shouldn't necessarily bring male victims of rape to the point where they are incapacitated by it, like female victims are, but we should bring it to the point where we recognize all victims of rape and their individual situations and their individual responses, keep the law completely not neutral, and just deal with it that way, and deal with it as it comes. And to be frank, I do know men who were very much traumatized by having been sexually assaulted or attempted rape or attempted gang rape by women. There are guys out there who are bothered by it, and in many cases there is an evolutionary reason behind it. Human males, like human females, are pair bonders. The only reason why we even talk about marriage or men taking care of women is because we are pair bonders. And male pair bonding animals, sexual behavior initiates a cascade of hormonal impulses in their brain, which can be very painful and damaging to turn off. So yes, men can be damaged by rape because these women are initiating this cascade in their brain, and again, that can be very painful to turn off. You certainly don't want to fall in love with your rapist. And so that's what I have to say about that. And I am going to cede the floor to Hannah. Go ahead, Hannah.
I just got a couple of brief things because I want to clarify we're not just talking about what feminists title date rape, which I'm not entirely in agreement that those circumstances are necessarily rape. If you get drunk because you drank, and if you have sex while you're drunk, you made a bad decision, and that's it. If you are incapacitated and you can't respond and someone has sex with you then, yeah, that's rape. But that's not the only way that men get raped, and men are not the only male humans that get raped. There is rape of boys, and there are circumstances in which men do get brutalized by bigger, stronger women. The way that we think of women being brutalized when we think of the word rape, and that is traumatic. And especially given the conditioning, the social conditioning of men to be bigger and stronger and not be dominated. And so when we're talking about this, I don't want to just talk about it as a coyote ugly thing, because those circumstances do happen. They're not rare, and they can be very, very painful emotionally and traumatic, and in different ways than a woman might experience.
That's very true. And yeah, I want to reinforce that point, that let's set aside the whole you got drunk and made a stupid decision. That isn't rape. It's drunk, made a stupid decision. We're talking about a situation where people are taking advantage of someone who's completely passed out drunk and isn't even conscious of their surroundings. But the other thing I wanted to say is that there is a hitch to all of this, and that is that men are trained not to hit women. And even a small woman can overpower a man who has been trained. And when you're trained, when you're conditioned not to do something, that's your go-to when you're stressed out, is to follow your conditioning. That's called muscle memory. Even a small woman could overpower a man in that circumstance, and it becomes even a more horrific situation. It's like a situation like you see a 100-pound woman beating a 1,500-pound horse. The horse is huge. It could kill her in an instant, but we consider it abuse because the horse has been trained not to use its greater strength against the person. And I'm not saying that men are dumb animals or horses, but I'm saying that emotional, that muscle memory is exactly the same. When you're in a stressful situation, you respond based on muscle memory. You respond based on your training. And I'm going to cede the floor to Janet. Janet, go ahead. I stepped on your toes a bit there, but hopefully...
No, not at all. And you know what? Everything you're saying is just so smart. I had no idea. I literally knew nothing about medieval women and property rights, and you really need to keep speaking because this history is just, it's not available. I have almost a decade's worth of post-secondary education, and that information has never gotten to me. That's crazy. Okay, it's super interesting, and I think you're making some really, really good points about how men can be emotionally impacted by rape. But some part of me also thinks that we're trying to talk about this with the really, really, really broad definition of rape that's out there currently, which to me, right now, as far as I'm concerned, rape is defined as any sexual experience a woman doesn't like in retrospect. And that's just crazy broad, right? Like, is a man going to be traumatized by being dragged into the woods by women and violated? Yes, just as much as any woman would be, right? But I don't know if we need to narrow the definition or we need to broaden our discussion of the topic. I like the fact that you brought up the evolutionary psychology because that's one of the things that sort of strikes me as wrong. There's some commenters on your blog and on mine who insist that men cannot be raped because they have not evolved the psychological mechanisms to be horrified by that. And that has to do with the possibility of having a pregnancy and carrying it to term. And you know what? I have to call a giant amount of bullshit on that idea that women are traumatized by rape because it might result in a baby and then, you're responsible for that child for the rest of your life. All of that rests on the assumption that men don't give a fuck about their children, right? Like they'll just run around and impregnate anyone and they don't really care what happens to the subsequent offspring. And it turns men into robots. I mean, you would think that men would have the same kind of evolutionary pressure to not want to plant their seed in whatever genetic specimens that were beneath them. I mean, if you're going to argue that that's women's argument, surely you can argue that it's men's too. But I think in contemporary culture, when we're talking about rape, defined as simply a sexual experience I regret in retrospect, then, yeah, men have those in equal numbers to women, but for some reason, well, it's not a mystery. Why am I saying for some reason? Because there's an entire mechanism in culture to get women to react hysterically to this. Like, oh, I dropped out of school, I'm suicidal, I'm taking psychotropic medications because, I sort of said no to my boyfriend and then just laid there and take it, and now my life is over. It's absurd, the kind of impacts women describe as the result of gray rape, not rape. As Whoopi Goldberg says, rape's pretty clear, and then gray rape is something else. Men just don't do that. I don't see that they do that. And I personally think it's probably a lot more mentally healthy. And I guess the inverse of what I'm saying is that, honestly, if it wasn't for this hysterical rape culture that we live in, most women wouldn't be that traumatized by it either.
Well, it's not fair to women to think that they're continually going to be defined by what happens to their vagina. I mean, there was a reporter in Iraq, which I forget the name of, who was supposedly raped, although there was a lot of, or not molested or something, and now she, for the rest of her life, is going to be defined by that. What happened to her vagina? And it's like that is such a horrible way of conceiving of women. Women are purely defined by how they are acted upon by men, and that's really what this rape hysteria does. It says that rape taints a woman; it becomes her defining act. And I'm sorry, I don't want to live like that. I don't want to live in a world where rape becomes a defining. If I get raped, that's going to be my defining act of my life. I would prefer to see it, and I even see the abuse that I suffered. I prefer to see it as a specific type of abuse that requires a specific type of therapy to get over. Do the therapy, get over it. It's not to say that rape should be allowed, but that you can recover from it. You can move on. It doesn't have to define you. It doesn't have to be who you are. And the problem with feminist rhetoric is that is what rape is becoming. Rape is becoming what women are. Rape victims is becoming what women are. That they are defined by being rape victims, and they're defined by being potential rape victims. And you're totally right. This is a completely unhealthy situation. It's an unhealthy way that our society has approached this issue. And we really need to get away from it because it does nobody any favors. And I agree with you. I agree with you. It does nobody any favors. I don't want to be in the position of starting to make men, encourage men to treat things that they would normally just brush off as worse than they are. I'm not about that. I think we need to respect the individual responses of people to trauma, but also not stigmatize the men who do have a severe reaction, because the reality is that we're all along a bell curve, and those guys might just have a much stronger hormonal cascade than other men. They might have evolved that. It's all different.
I know a lot of reasons for why we define women based on their vaginas, and why we make rape a defining thing in a person's life has to do with the victim complex, the feminist victim complex. But I think another part of it is the perspective from which that we are defining rape. When we think about other crimes, like if we think about a person being killed by another person, we have a whole bunch of different names from that, not just based on the experience of the victim, but based on the intent and actions of the perpetrator. Murder is a crime all by itself that's separated by the intent and knowing situation of the killer. If you didn't intend to kill, it becomes involuntary manslaughter, but you are still accused of killing the other person. And this is something that we really don't do so much with sex crimes. We start defining rape based on how the person that we're going to call the victim, whether the person actually has been victimized or not, feels about the incident. And that's why we end up with things like regret accusations. And if we were to turn around and put that intent back into the definition and define rape as a sex act in which a perpetrator knowingly and willfully contravenes a victim's right or ability to refuse, instead of saying, well, we're going to use the word consent, and then we're going to make the definition of consent as slippery as humanly possible so that nobody can really know whether they've got consent, then we would not have this problem.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different factors going on, and lots of meat to get into to discuss and then deal with. But we're going to go to a caller. Again, the number is 1-310-388-9709. That's 1-310-388-9709. We're going to go now to Evan. Evan, you have been holding for a long time, but you're on the air.
Yes, I know. I like to be early. That's kind of that's something I just like to be. I was wondering because my college is currently putting up a production of the Vagina Monologues, and I think you all know one of the most controversial scenes in that was the so-called good rape scene featured in the monologue called "The Little Coochie Snorcher That Could," where a 13-year-old girl is given alcohol and seduced by a lesbian who proceeds to have sex with her. I was wondering, when Mary Koss did her study of the women who said that did she ask the women who she studied the gender of the person they were forced to have sex with? Because I'm wondering if this feminist suppression of male rape victims by women, does the same thing apply to female rape victims of other women?
Yes, it does. It definitely does. They have, in many ways, erased other women, female victims of female predators, in order to erase male victims, female predators entirely. It's like they want to have this big empty void when it comes to female sexual predation. They don't want to recognize that women's sexuality can act in just the same negative ways as men's sexuality can. And
I was just going to say, I hear that quote from feminists, patriarchy hurts women too, and I feel like this is a case of feminism hurts women too, if that makes any sense to you. And I feel like when you discuss gender issues, it has a lot. I see a lot of that happening.
Well, once you're starting to divide victims into acceptable and unacceptable categories, I think that your ideology is pretty much hurting everyone. I mean, I know that, seriously, the feminists, I will not argue that feminism and the current state of affairs is really shitty for men, but it also is shit for women. And what's really funny is that feminists are okay with it making it shit for women, just as long as it's shittier for men. And
it's
with
like
that,
it's a race to the bottom, it seems like.
Yeah, and with that, I am pleased to announce that Karen is on the air. Karen has wrangled the carpet or pistons or duct tape or whatever the hell she was doing, and she has managed to come back to us. Karen, you're on the air.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing well.
All right. Well, one thing that I want to say actually about, sort of the worthy victim and the unworthy victim is that I don't even know whether that is the primary reason why these particular incidences are written off as not rape and not a problem and not existent or extant by feminists. I think that it's not necessarily, as I've said before, feminists have no problem with accepting that a man can be a rape victim when another man has raped him. I think it actually has more to do with concealing female perpetration. This is really what it is. It's not so much that they are unable to see men as victims. It is that they completely reject the idea of women as perpetrators, of women as actors, of women as capable of committing an act or a wrong. And so, I mean, this is really the consistency that I have seen throughout all of this stuff, domestic violence, sexual violence, everything that feminists do not want to look at is that women are capable of it. Women have the power to injure others. Women have the ability to injure others. They don't want to see that, and they don't want to address it. And yes, there are women who are victims of female perpetrators who are left out in the cold. There are way more men who are victims of female perpetrators who are left out in the cold because of that. But I really don't think that it's necessarily because they're not seen as worthy victims. It's because feminism does not want to address woman as perpetrator.
I see. do you think there might also be another motive? Because another case that this reminded me of is, I think back in August, there was a case down in Florida there was a 19-year-old girl who was arrested for statutory rape of her 14-year-old female girlfriend. This is after repeated requests to stay away, and she was finally arrested for stat rape. And one of the things that the parents of the perpetrator did was try to turn this into some kind of LGBT rights issue. Do you think there's some kind of I want to choose my words very carefully because I don't want to paint all feminists like this. There's some kind of like tacit acceptance of when women do it to maybe adolescent girls who are like maybe 13, 14, and they're like, no, it's not even that it's rape. This is a good thing for the child or anything like that in the more radical feminist bent?
It's seen as harmless. That's the thing.
Karen,
go ahead.
Karen, I have a question for you. Maybe this is semantics, but do you think it's that feminists do not see women as perpetrators, or that they do not see men as capable of being harmed? So, in the first place, you're preserving the idea of, the kind lady, bountiful, maternal, always loving, feminine image. And in the second case, where you simply don't think that men are capable of being hurt, there's a little subtext there that says that men will continue to be useful. They will always be useful tools for us because we can't really hurt them. I mean, maybe it's just semantics, but there's something about it that says women don't see other women as being perpetrators or victims. Something about that rings false to me because we're all humans, right? We all know we're capable of that. In some ways, I think psychologically, it's easier to look at men and say, whatever, you guys don't feel anything. What did a writer at Jezebel called men emotionless dick bots? I mean, there's something very strategic about simply believing that the victim of your aggression can't be injured. It's not that you don't see yourself as aggressive, you just don't believe you're hurting anyone. Do you think that's just semantics?
Well, it is, because if you're not actually hurting anybody, then how can you be aggressive? How can your actions be considered aggressive or hurtful? This is the thing. Like, if you want to go, I do agree that it's very, very difficult for feminists and for society to see men as being vulnerable and being prone to being victimized, right? But again, you look at it, the CDC's NISVS, they are perfectly happy saying a man is a victim of rape if the person who rapes him is a man, right? They are perfectly okay with that, that they will call that rape. They will not call it rape if the person who victimized him was a woman. And you see this, too, in, feminists do not want to address domestic violence in same-sex relationships, and it's not because there's violence in gay male relationships. It's because they don't want to address the violence that exists in lesbian relationships. They do not want to acknowledge that even happens. And frankly, they grudgingly, and they will be generous and effusive, and of course a man can be, raped, but 99 times out of 100 it'll be by another man, right? Because that keeps the male as actor, male as perpetrator model going, the narrative going. They will not address female perpetration. They just will not, right? And that's the primary, I think, agenda for them. And frankly, if they did address female perpetration of sexual violence, domestic violence, all of these other things, patriarchy theory would go out the window. So it's no wonder they're so married to it.
Yes, it is no wonder.
The idea that it doesn't happen.
Well, I want to thank Evan for calling in and asking those great questions and sparking some wonderful discussion. And please call in again in the future. And now we're going to go to Nefanor. Nefenor, you have been waiting a long time, and you are on the air.
I just usually call in to listen, but, as soon as I heard some of what Judgy Bitch had to say, I had to comment.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Well, the one thing is you were commenting before about saying that there are ways that men can be raped in ways that aren't physical, but that aren't involving drunk either. And two examples come to mind, both of which I know actually happened. One was told to me by a counselor that I was seeing in high school, and the other was from a news report I read. First one is the guy was raped by his boss's wife, who told him that if he didn't sleep with her, she was going to tell the boss that he attacked her and was going to get him fired. And then, of course, you can guess what would happen with his wife. Eventually, he ended up killing himself. The other one was a Marine who was out drinking with a friend and his girlfriend, and he left, the friend left, and so the girlfriend was left with him. She was a few months pregnant. The two of them decided, oh, you know what, we'll just share a hotel room since we're too far away and too drunk. He wakes up in the middle of the night, she's on top of him, and says, if you don't continue, I'm going to say you raped me, because who's going to believe you? So the two examples of just how men can be victimized without physical force.
What gives women the power to do that is the believe the woman mantra. And as long as we have this ideal in society, oh, women never lie about being raped, women don't lie about being abused, you have to believe her if she tells a story. And this is something that feminists have fought for. They have they've pushed for laws to prevent accused men from contesting things that women have said in court. And they have pushed for protections. So that, she's got to stay anonymous. He's not going to be anonymous, and so on. That as long as we have this believe the woman ideal, this belief that they're never going to lie, that they're never going to make it up, they're going to have the power to use false accusations to force men to do things. And one of those things is going to be sex.
Exactly. And it's all completely ass backwards.
Oh, completely. This is not as uncommon as people would think. And I know I typed it down in chat, but I got to say this. This is something that I've seen used against people I know more than once. I've seen it used to kick a man out of his house in preparation for divorce, and I've seen it used to get a promotion on the job. So this is not something that is entirely rare.
No, not at all. And I want to thank Nefenor for. I know that you normally just listen, but you had some great contributions. And please do consider, contributing again in the future. And I want to move now to Mad Shengi. Mad Shengi.
Hello there. Hi. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to bring up how the reason why a lot of people have trouble buying men as rape victims is there's an assumption about men in general that they are always sexually available to women, that men are always wanting it, basically, that men are walking hard-ons. And this is something that I've always found appalling, because if we were to say that about women, there'd be a riot, basically. Now,
I agree. But the irony is that there were times when we did say that about women. But go on.
Yeah. Well, I remember a time when I was 20 years old, and there was a woman who was 33, and she offered herself to my dad, and he rejected her, and so on. And this woman actually approached my dad and asked about if I would be interested in her, and of course I wasn't. This particular woman was it was a real piece of work. She was the kind of woman that would jiggle her tits in front of the security camera at work there, and then later on she'd be whining that everybody's talking about her, that the people that saw her on camera doing that were snickering and making jokes about her, just total attention-seeking behavior. And that's a turn-off for a guy like me that, wants something more from a woman than attention seeking and drama and sex. I remember telling this story to another woman. She's just like, "Really? You turn down sex?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah. It doesn't matter to me if somebody offers themselves to me. I'm not going to automatically jump on that just because it's there. You know, I find that just very insulting as a man that the assumption that just because I'm a man, I'm always going to want sex when it's offered."
Well, and the assumption that's being made is actually more specific. That it's not just that you're always going to want sex when it's offered, but it's that you're not going to care who you have it with. You know, this is a very dehumanizing assumption, because if you think about it, that assumption isn't made related to even simpler choices in life. You know, just because you're hungry doesn't mean that you don't have a preference for a certain type of food, and that's a really simple impulse. There's not really anything that complex about eating, even though there's a huge variety of food out there. You know, when it comes to human companionship and the intimacy of sex, to be treated as if you have no right to any kind of preferences and no right to any kind of, you know, to reject one person in favor of another because of behaviors, that is incredibly dehumanizing. It's putting you beneath the level of a dog, you know, that would just take whatever it can get.
Yeah, and that's why you're dealing with types that are like, well, men can't get raped because they like it, you know. They get an erection, that's consent. And it's like, no, it's not. Men don't always get erections because they're aroused. I get an erection just for waking up in the morning. I mean, come on now. It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's just, you know, that's why a lot of men, I've talked to one guy that I worked with, and he described how his girlfriend drugged him with a date rape drug, and he's like, "Oh well, I got laid," and it's, you know, men have bought into this as well, that they're walking hard on, that this is something, you know, that they shouldn't complain about. I mean, if it happened to me, I don't care if I wanted sex at the time. Just the fact that somebody drugged me, if someone were to drug me and I don't know what's going on, I would be completely outraged that somebody did that to me, regardless of whether I wanted sex or not.
Okay, Matt Chengi, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
It's Janet. There's a truism. I've been out of the dating market for 14 years now, so I don't know if this is true, but there's a truism that says any woman, I mean, except for the most grotesquely unattractive, unappealing woman, but essentially any woman can walk into a bar and leave with a sexual partner for the night. That if she indicates to a man that she wants to have sex with him and it's going to be consensual, that she's going to get that. And yet, the same is not true for men. Is that true, or is that just a stereotype?
Well, I think there's some truth to the stereotype, because let's face it, women don't have to try as hard as men to get laid. There's always going to be a man that's desperate enough to even go with the most grotesque, beastly war pig in the bar just because she's available. But not all men are like that,
Right. That's just like saying not all women are like that. But how can you reconcile that as a generalization that you can spread across the population to say that as a man I care about a woman's personality and I want to be, I want an emotional trigger. I want to feel a connection. I don't doubt that's true about you. This is no insult to you. In fact, I'm sure it is. But how can that be true of the majority of men, and yet it also be true that almost any woman can walk into a bar and just pick up a guy she doesn't know and get fucked? I mean, those two things cannot be true at once.
I can cut in here.
Outlier, you're very different,
like I said,
and that's lovely.
Men have to try harder to attract women. I mean, usually men have to have good jobs to be more appealing. They, you know, they have to have. They basically they have to try a lot harder to find a sexual partner and have game and say all the right things when you know, when a lot of guys, and you know, obviously not all guys, a lot of them, the only prerequisite a woman should have is tits and a smile. And,
right. The only prerequisite a man needs is a wallet. So basically, we're right back to square one, right? Like men need to be rich and women need to be pretty. Women are whores and men buy sex. Like, I don't see how this conversation is getting us out of that. How is this conversation getting us out of that?
Okay, let me take a swing at that fastball you've lobbed there.
Yay! You usually knock it out of the park, so give her.
Well, if you look at the bar scene, and let's include women who also will have sex with money. If a man comes with a large enough wad of cash, he will leave with a partner. Even
Woody Allen?
Yeah, okay. Setting aside Woody Allen, but even if it's a working girl, he's going to leave with a partner. So if you include women who have sex for cash, then men can pretty much have sex when they want to as well. Now, what we're looking at in the situation of bars is there's a certain class of man who will give up his sexuality for social approval. In our society, women have been granted essentially a form of cash that men don't have, and that is social approval. So these men are in bars, and they're looking for a woman, for any sort of social approval from a woman, and when all the women who come through, like men, have an invisible wallet full of social approval, and that's what these guys are after. And these are the guys who are lowering the average for all men. Because they will do anything to get social
right
approval.
on the money.
They're exactly like the whores, or I don't have a problem with whores. I think they're honest businesswomen, but they're exactly like the women who will give up their sex for money. These guys will give up their sex merely for social approval, and they're lowering the average for all guys. So yeah, a woman can walk into a bar and get one of these guys, and a man can walk into a bar and get a woman who's willing to exchange her sex for a different kind of currency, which is money. So it's the same difference.
That's very brilliant. Thank you. You know what? That's an absolutely amazing analysis of that. Yeah, social approval. I mean, that's what the whole word creep is about, too, right? Like, creep is someone that women don't socially approve of.
Mm-hmm.
Well, while we're on the subject, too, I happen to notice that for men in particular, there seems to be a stigma for men who are single. You know, I've been approached once by a girl who chatted me up and like, do you have a girlfriend? And I'm like, well, no. And it's like, oh, do you have a boyfriend then? So it's like, oh, because I said I didn't have a girlfriend, then I could only be possibly gay, you know? You didn't ask me if I've had girlfriends in the past. I find a lot of men have fallen into that trap, and that's why when they're asked about their social status, basically they have to come up with, oh, I'm in between girlfriends right now, because they don't want to get hit with that label there. Oh, maybe you're gay.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that. The other one is that one of the most attractive things a woman can see on a man is their wedding ring. And it's part of it is, you know, obviously this guy is heterosexual if he's married, or at least you can most of the time safely assume that. But it's like women don't seem to find a guy attractive if they don't have to compete for him. And at least compete for his attention, and he's been found worthy by another woman, and therefore that makes him desirable. And of course, the other thing is if she's got him, well then, you know, then the next woman has to try to get him away.
I noticed that a lot. A lot of women, they wouldn't even look twice at this guy, but then all of a sudden they see him around with some hot chick, and it's like, oh, I got to steal this guy.
Yes, And then, of course, the other end of it is the whole gay shaming thing. If you don't want me, you must be gay. If you don't have a girlfriend, you must be gay. And the only reason that works is because so many people get upset if their sexuality is mistaken. And that's, pretty much all sexualities. You don't want to be told that your sexuality is what it is.
I'm guilty of that too, because I've had that comment to me, and I've let it bother me, and oh, geez, she thinks I'm gay just because I didn't have a girlfriend at the time she asked me, and a guy like me, that makes me pretty leery about approaching women who have this mindset.
Well, the thing is to not let that get to you, because you have to remember that just because somebody else says it about you doesn't make it true.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mad Shengi. Thank you for what you brought to the show. We do have a lot of callers, but thanks again. And we're going to move now to Glenn. Glenn, you are on the air.
Hello there. Really enjoying the show tonight. Thanks a lot. Hi.
Oh, you're welcome.
I want to take a slightly different perspective, maybe zoom out a little bit to the bigger picture here. One of the things that strikes me about the whole conversation about sexual assault is the sort of level of hysteria, and just forget gender for a second, compared to the actual incidence of it, right? I remember seeing statistics specifically from both Carnegie Mellon University and then from University of Texas where, if you use the numbers that the Kosses and these other people are throwing around, you'd have to see thousands and thousands of sexual assaults and rapes being reported, and yet you get to Carnegie Mellon and there's 6 or 8 a year reported. Or that there was this big feminist at University of Texas who said, well, we should be having at least 8,000 rapes reported a year or something, but really there was only 80. So I have a theory as to why this is not a theory. It's a thesis I'd like to throw out at you folks, see what you think of it. I'm very impressed by the idea of the female imperative being imposed on society more and more in recent years, where the concerns of women are just supposed to be important to everybody. And I think this is a way of women doing several things. One is claiming more control over sex in general, just creeping up what consent is in every way possible, even retroactively, but also just, the encroachment of what, making everything that is important to women more important, right? No matter what. It's got to be, this is, because, and then even if the data doesn't fit, well, we'll just change the data and jury-rig the whole thing and do phony studies. We just want to have what's important to women more important in society. And it feels very much like that to me. Because and one of the things I'm worried about, I'm not worried about, but with this conversation is, the incidence of sexual assault is fairly low, right, for men or women. So, I don't know. I mean, it's a concern, obviously. And I don't know what you might think of all that.
Well, you're right. The incidence of the kind of sexual assault that is deeply traumatic and terrifying is fairly low, and the rest is sort of a gray area. What can I say? I'm of the opinion that every individual reacts differently depending on their life circumstance, their brain chemistry, and all kinds of other individual factors. So I think that in a lot of cases, my personal opinion is, yes, there is hysteria, and feminists are invested in inflating the numbers, and they're also invested in, inflating the numbers for women and reducing the numbers for men. And
right.
I think the intent behind this is because if you show the numbers for men, everybody's going to be like, the numbers are for men or for this, and that'll take away from the supposed victimhood of women, right? And one of the reasons
but because all we're supposed to care about in society are women's concerns is my larger point, right?
Yeah,
it's just much more important. And you talk about the incidence of it. I mean, what are there in the United States? There's about 80,000 reported rapes a year, according to the Universal Crime Statistics, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, out of a population of 320 million people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a really low incidence of crime. And even if you say it's, I don't believe the 6% number, but let's say it's 20% reported, right? I mean, so multiply it by 5. That still would be 400,000 out of a nation of 315,000. 250 million adults, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it just strikes me as hysteria And it's what I see all across feminism with every issue that they're talking about, whether it's income inequality. It's just bash the political system and all the educational institutions and all the cultural institutions to get what's important to women to be more and more and more important. And I just laugh at it now. I dismiss it all. I don't take any of it seriously. So, but I think that's what much larger motivation here. That's what's driving a lot of this nonsense.
Well, the reality is that feminists use rape as evidence of a patriarchal culture that's trying to oppress women. And
but isn't that really about women trying to just reclaim power over sexuality? To just say, look, this we control more and more how sex occurs in society, right? Is that just a tool for them to do that?
Well, I don't think women ever really lost power over sexuality. But I'm going to cede the floor to Hannah. Hannah, you've been waiting patiently.
Part of this has more to do with what feminists are trying to push on the legislative and policy front. Because if you look at, let's see, what do we title it in Voice for Men? The Campus False Accuser Protection Act, where and I believe it's called the Campus Save Act. And the acronym stands for something, but I honestly cannot remember what it was. Essentially, it is the Dear Colleague letter that was sent out from the Education Department, written into law with some extra teeth added. It's basically making men, criminalizing the male aspect of hookup culture, where college students, go out, they party, they get together, they have one-night stands, and, hey, the next day the girl regrets it. And in a university setting, in a college setting now, if a girl complains about her regrets, the college is required to investigate that the same way as they would investigate it if somebody comes in and actually does brutalize a girl or brutalize a guy. And they are expected to use, they're legally required to use a lower standard of proof than you would get in court. And they're not required to encourage the alleged victim to come forward to police and make the accusation with police, where there would be a forensic investigation and an actual court hearing where the accused would get a fair trial. Instead, they're encouraged to just hold these kangaroo courts on these college campuses, and then it creates a greater chance that a false accusation or a mistaken accusation where somebody was drunk and doesn't remember who she was with and thinks it was this guy when it was really that guy, things like that to go through and ruin somebody's life. So this type of thing is completely unreasonable, and you cannot convince people that something that unreasonable or the laws that prevent evidence from being admitted into court in rape cases that feminists have fought against having presented, like you cannot talk about a woman's sexual history even if it's relevant to the case unless you get a judge's permission, and the rape shield laws, a lot of these things they wouldn't have been able to push them successful if they did not exaggerate the incidence of victim instance.
Oh, okay. But look at it this way. You say, well, look at. I think it behooves us to look at what kind of legislation they're trying to push through, as if that is sort of an ultimate motive, is to push through legislation. But frankly, I'm looking at the legislation that they're trying to push through and the policies that they're trying to push through. I'm looking at them as basically resulting the ends of their motivation, and their motivation, as far as I'm concerned, as far as feminism goes, I think that their motivation is it's a religious devotion to patriarchy theory. This is really what it is. Like everything that they have done, inflating as much as possible the number of female victims of rape and domestic violence. Even in that Ottawa report where they took the 585,000 Canadian men and 601,000 Canadian women and turned that into 1.2 million Canadian women. Like everything that they have been doing has basically been trying to bring data, trying to bring statistics, and trying to bring reality, trying to like twist it and coerce it and force it and just like jam it into the model of patriarchy. And of course they're going to use domestic violence and rape, twist those statistics and define male victims out of existence, and especially female perpetrators and all of these things, because they held domestic violence and rape for the last 40, 50 years or more. They held those up as sort of evidentiary pillars for their grand unifying theory of the universe, right? The patriarchy.
Yeah, definitely.
These are the two pillars of evidence that they use to prove that their religion is correct, right?
And they don't want to give it up because they're ideologues, and it's just this, an ideologue will just they're just impervious to facts. You might as well be throwing unboiled eggs at brick walls.
Yeah, no, this is what it is. It's basically all of and every single piece of legislation that they're trying to put through is also inflating the numbers, right? Like predominant aggressor policies. What do? They keep the numbers of male men arrested for domestic violence inflated compared to female. What do all of the rape shield laws and the rape reform laws do? They make it easier to convict men of rape, right? They make it easier to prove that their religious belief, their faith in this construct, this ethereal, ephemeral construct of patriarchy is actually reality, right? It's almost like they're trying to engineer the world so that it will prove their faith.
Exactly. And I wanted to thank Glenn for calling in. Unfortunately, we can't bring him back on because he has some serious sound issues. And we are going to move now to Kid. Kid, you're on the air.
Hello?
Okay, Kid, you're going to have to fix your sound before you start talking. We're moving now to Nightwing. Hello, Nightwing. You're on the air. Oh, thank you. Good evening to you, too.
Good evening to Janet, Hannah, and Karen.
Yep.
And, of course, James in the back room.
Sorry, who?
James in the back room.
Yeah, you're cutting in and out a bit, so.
Okay. I have actually a couple of things on this. Number one, in my early 20s, I was actually raped by a woman.
Okay.
And, nobody believed me. That was over a decade and a half ago. But that's what you've been talking about as to how they don't want to admit it. They don't want to admit that women can be just as horrible as men. I would have to say they don't want to look in the mirror. They don't want to see how horrible they really are.
How horrible that feminists are, or women, or how horrible women can be?
Well, both feminists and how horrible women can be.
Well, it's a hard thing to look at, but the reality is that understanding both sides of your nature, both the dark and the light, is how we grow as people. And hiding it does women no favors. It does men even fewer favors, right? I'm firmly of the opinion that nobody rapes because they woke up and they've had a great day, right? So female abusers, they're not getting the treatment they need. Male abusers are being used to slander all men, and it's just a situation where nothing is really done except these ideological interests grow fat off of sucking on the vein of public sympathy, and I don't know what to say. What else to say to that? It's shit all around, and they're helping nobody.
Pretty much. But also, on the as a former pickup artist, I can tell you that yes, literally women can go in. I mean, I've had this joke back when I was in the pickup scene. You know, women can go in, say I'm a little drunk, and they'd have like 10 guys ready to go. Guys basically have to fork out hundreds of dollars just to have a shot.
Well, to that I would say, to use my analogy that I said before, women are essentially like men walking into a club, like millionaire men walking into a club full of courtesans. You know, it's just a situation where social currency it's bigger bills than actual physical currency. Like if every guy was a millionaire, he could get laid every night. You could just buy it, and that's what that's the situation that women are in. They have incredible gobs of social currency, and men will compete for the social approval of a woman's sexuality. And it's exactly the same situation. The only difference is that women, by virtue of being born, are just given this bank account which is flush with all kinds of social approval, social currency, social approval cash.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that's what guys are raised to seek, is that social approval. We have to have a woman. We have to have a woman in order to be worth anything. Our jobs don't matter. Our lives don't matter. We could have the greatest life in the world, a flush bank account, a phenomenal job. We're still worthless without a woman.
Yeah, and I would say that is really what's creating a lot of the disparity. It's just simply women have this extra form of currency that men are clamoring for. And a lot of guys will sell out their sexuality for a bit of this intangible approval, of feminine approval. And it's really exactly the same as a woman who will sell her sexuality for cash, because it's an exchange, really. But I thank you for your call, Nightwing. Unfortunately, we are inundated with calls tonight, and we do have to move on.
That's fine. You have a good...
You too. I'm going to move now to Yobi. Did I say that correct, Yobi?
Hello?
Hi.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I have a story that I just learned about just a few days ago. It was about this conversation that I had with this random girl that I met online. I don't want to go into too much details because I don't want she might listen to this by any chance. It's still a chance, but she might. Just in the case that she might listen to this, I don't want to go into too many details. But she actually told me it was one of the most awkward, most weird conversations I've ever had in my life.
Yobi, before you continue, I'm going to need you to increase your volume somehow.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. This girl that I had a conversation with, she had like a very, very weird kind of lifestyle. Weird kind of she was like a sex addict, let's just say. And she told me that she pretty much went around and actually hung around outside at night hoping to get raped. And it was like, that's unbelievable, and it actually happened to her. But when it comes to that kind of thing, it's actually a little bit more common than you think. Like women that actually want to get raped, that have like maybe not to the level that she took it to, where she actually seeked it out, but like women that actually have like a desire to have some random guy and just come in and just rape her for no, just because she wants it. And so like I want to ask you if this has anything to do with like maybe the rape statistics that Mary Koss has come up with. Like I know perhaps maybe it could be considered rape, but these women that actually want it, like the girl that I had a conversation with, would it be ethical to punish the guy even though the girl actually wanted it? I could kind of see where you could punish the guy. It makes sense because he was going around looking for a victim, but the thing is that victim actually didn't see herself as a victim. She actually wanted it, or she just put herself in that situation.
Well, actually, I got two things to say to that. The first one is the majority of rape that's cited in discussion on rape is not the stranger in a dark alley rape. The second thing is, if you go out looking for sex and you get sex, and that's what you were seeking, that's not rape. Even if you have, there are people with rape fetishes and rape fantasies and all that, but it's not a real fetish for rape. It's not a real fetish for or fantasy of rape. It is a desire for rough sex with a lack of accountability for it. Because as soon as you are seeking it and targeting to, deliberately seeking it and deliberately going out to get it, that is you participating in an act. So no, that is not rape.
I'd like to thank Yobi for the call. Unfortunately, we're getting a lot of feedback from his line, which is making it pretty incomprehensible. So I had to mute him. And we are going to go now to Jordan. Jordan, you're on the air.
Hello, how are you?
Hi.
Hey.
I'm doing well.
Good to hear. This is Jordan, joining 42 from YouTube, so that just to blow the dog whistle for any listeners I may have out there. Anyway, so many things. I actually sat down and started making notes about what I wanted to talk about, and I stopped making notes because I knew if I tried to hit it all, I would be here all night. I wanted to add a few things to the discussion. One thing, I don't want to go into my own experience with this, except to say that as someone who is an entertainer, who's worked in the arts and entertainment, I have had a tremendous number of gay and lesbian friends, and the issue of lesbian domestic abuse, oh my God, that needs to be looked into more. I'm just going to put that out there. And that's just a passing point, but that so needs to be looked into more. And I think there's actually a gender binary element to it, because if you think about it, men in the gay community are expected to be softer, and women in the gay community are expected to be tougher, more hard edge, and that kind of thing. And I think there is an element of that in it. But more specifically, I was thinking about my own experience with this kind of thing that you described, that a couple of scenarios from my own life. I was at a metal show here in Atlanta, and this girl came up to me and latched onto me. And when I say latched onto me, I mean she just sucked onto me, vice grip, and she starts playing with my hair. And I said, "Go away." And she said, "I just want to play with your hair," and it'd go away. And I had to yell at her and say, "Get lost," and knock it off. And I actually, as soon as the show was over, she finally went away. As soon as the show was over, I got the guy that I'd ridden there with. I said, "We got to get out of here," and we left. I left ASAP. And the thing of it was, it was really actually scary to me, because if I had hit her, I would have been automatically in the wrong. I never would understand. I would not have hit her, but if I had hit her, I'd have been automatically in the wrong. If I had come up to her and done what she had just done to me, if I had gone up and grabbed her and started feeling her up and playing with her hair, and then didn't stop when she told me to stop, that would have been assault, sexual assault, and rightly so. So I was really haunted by the double standard, and there's so much more to that. She could have gotten some drunk ass from the bar to come beat me up or something like that. So when something like that happens, there's a whole lot of up in the air stuff that doesn't get thought of. But what really struck me was when I told this incident to some of my friends, my female friends understood immediately why I would be uncomfortable by that. My male friends, all of them said, "Well, I assume, so she was ugly, right?" And I said, "No, she was actually really hot. She was what you would call a perfect 10 in anybody's book." your opportunity. And it really kind of made me angry in a way, because it's like there's no concept, like you're talking about. There's no concept of men not wanting to be interested, wanting to get into that. It's just assumed that you consent by default. And I was wondering, it was one topic. There's one other thing I wanted to get into. I wanted to put it on the table. That what do you all think is the change in dialogue that needs to happen among men to become more aware of that sort of thing?
Well, I think that the change in dialogue, and I want to pull out something Hannah said earlier in the show, it's the idea that if you somebody who's hungry, even if you, and that's a very basic drive, you still allow that they have different tastes and they have different desires. I mean, and that's the most basic drive we have. I mean, why can't, and it's like one of the least complex drives we have. I mean, even amoeba have hunger, right?
Yeah.
And one of the most complex is our sexuality. So why can't we allow that our sexuality has a lot of complexity to it as well? And men's sexuality has a lot of complexity to it as well. I mean, even if men are hungry, quote unquote, they may not like asparagus. They may prefer turnips, whatever, Yeah. And accept that there's a complexity there. And I think a lot of the dialogue that has to happen is around this almost religious idolization of women as the source of male identity. Yeah. It really feels religious in a lot of ways, because that's really what a religion is. It's about who you are and what you idolize. And I think there does need to be that kind of discourse, and men, in my opinion, as a woman, I want to qualify that, men need to support each other in allowing that kind of complexity and allowing that kind of, different appetites. And, this woman may have been like a chocolate truffle cake, perfect chocolate truffle cake. You hate chocolate,
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I think for me, I think the angle on it for me was that she was physically, she was absolutely somebody I would have desired. It was just talking about what you're talking about the assumption that men are always ready to go. I was in no mood to be hit on that night. I was in no mood. I just wanted to go see that band and, hang out and go see that band and leave. And I was in no mood to be hit on, and I just didn't want to think about any of that at all. And there's this assumption, there's a very strong advocacy among feminists, the notion that, I know the pickup artists like to spread the notion that if a woman's by herself, that means she wants to be hit on. And of course that's complete bullshit. And, I would like to see that balance occur, more for men. So that's more my perspective on it of, just, hey, there are these boundaries nevertheless. What I wanted to really throw down in your discussion.
Okay, Jordan.
Yes.
Your sound is coming in and out. Is there any way that you can increase your sound and make it more consistent?
I can try to reposition. How do I sound now?
Yeah, you're sounding a bit better. So continue.
Okay, I'm going to throw this in there. What I wanted to throw in for the discussion, though, was what you were talking about the way that the feminist establishment, if you will, the academic establishment and that sort of thing, views rape. Some information, some insight into that I got from one young woman who was affiliated with a lot of the top feminists of the modern era and everything. What she told me that she said, one of the things in socialization, the socialization process towards rape, rapists prey on people that are vulnerable to them, and there's a process of making you vulnerable to them that's known as grooming. And grooming refers to all of the techniques that people, that rapists and sexual predators and everything will use to groom somebody, a woman, a man, a child, for being transgressed against. And she said that what she realized after leaving leaving that whole community, that whole religion, if you will, leaving it all behind. She said, looking back, the way she was recruited into academic feminism and everything, the same techniques that are used to groom, and I don't want to go into extraordinary detail, but the same techniques that are used to groom a rape victim were used by, or a sex abuse victim, were used by the people who recruited her into that movement. And I really think that that's part of the feminist, gender feminist opposition to acknowledging male rape and acknowledging that women can victimize men and that sort of thing, because really it's kind of like I think there's a tremendous crossover between the victimizer mentality of the rapist or the sexual predator and the victimizer mentality of the people who recruit into these extremist movements like that. And I think that's kind of a dirty little secret that's kept quiet, if not consciously kept quiet, then it's certainly an undertone of what's going on. It's kind of like surgeons. They say there's a similarity mentally between surgeons and serial killers, that surgeons operate on you when they look at you. They imagine you cut up and cut open and that kind of thing, which is what serial killers do. And so I think there's an overlap there that needs to be discussed, that needs to be acknowledged. I'm sure you all would be the first to agree that among the machinations of feminism, there's a tremendous amount of predatory behavior and that sort of thing going on.
Well, yeah, I would agree. I would agree. I find it a lot of feminists twig my spidey sense.
Yeah.
And I have to wonder about someone who is attracted to an ideology that categorically excludes female abuse. A woman who's attracted to that, it's a little bit suspicious. But unfortunately, we have a ton of callers, Jordan, and we want to sort of get through all of them. I really appreciate your comments. It was a great call, great insight.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
having
you for
me.
calling.
Take care.
I want to move now to. We're going to move now to Kai. Kai, did I pronounce that right?
Yep.
K-I-E, Kai?
K-A-I.
K-A-I. Okay, well, your sound is really faint. Can you...
Let me see.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Better? Yeah, we can hear you. So what did you want to bring to the table today?
Okay, I was... Karen, you there?
Karen is here.
Yeah.
I was
watching her talk at Ryerson on YouTube, and you got the usual question or claim by someone that my feminism isn't like that. And I have a friend, or I suppose a friend, that it just makes me grind my teeth every time I hear that, well, for me, feminism doesn't mean that. And I think the argument I hear MRAs use the most against this is that, yes, maybe, I know that you don't mean that, but the feminists that matter are, excluding male rape victims. They're not allowing government funding for male domestic violence shelters. And while I think that's a good reason for, feminism being a bad thing, I think what should be focused upon is the fact that it's patriarchy theory that leads to that, and all the bullshit about, Mary Koss twisting the rape statistics to exclude male victims.
I actually would agree with that. I would actually say that I speak in general terms about feminism, and I'm extremely critical of it. And, I don't much care that Christina Hoff Sommers calls herself a feminist. I don't expect her to consider herself lumped in with the people that I'm talking about. The people that I talk about when I talk about feminists and feminism are the people who subscribe to patriarchy theory and all of the bastard stepchildren of patriarchy theory, like rape culture and systemic gendered violence against women and the Duluth model and all of those things, right? But a lot of women, I have noticed, and even a handful of men that I've come across, they actually see feminism as the dictionary definition. They don't know anything about patriarchy theory. They have no idea what that all of that entails and all of it implies, right? They got no clue, right? They just think, they read in the dictionary that feminism is the belief that men and women are equally persons under the law, right? Equally persons, equal members of humanity, right? And so that's what they are, and those are the people that I would really like to just kind of dissuade from using the name. Personally, I would love for every single person who subscribes to patriarchy theory and rape culture and all of this other bullshit, proudly proclaim yourself a feminist, because once all of your bullshit has been untangled and deconstructed and proven to be completely and utterly bullshit, right, then that name is going to be the scarlet letter that you're going to be wearing, right? I'm happy for those people to call themselves feminists. I would love for them to self-identify, because then I know who they are and I know who to concentrate my criticisms on, right? But there are that sort of that very small number of people who think it's just a belief in basic equality under the law. And for them, I do try to persuade them to just change the word that they identify as. Identify as an equalist or an egalitarian or a humanist or a women's rights activist, even anything other than feminism, because you're just giving moral permission. You're a good person, you're a decent person, you're just giving moral permission and cover and a smokescreen for all of these really horrible people who are doing horrible things.
Well, the thing is that they're sort of like the vanguard. They're actually the ones protecting these horrible people, because somebody will point out and say, these feminist patriarchy theory, and they'll say, but that's not my feminism, and they will spend more time trying to shout down the person, trying to point out the horrors happening that feminists are enacting in government based on patriarchy theory. They'll spend more time trying to shout down the person by saying that's not my feminism than they will opposing the people doing what's the horrible things in the name of feminism. So today I got into a similar exchange, and for me it finally boiled down to this. A good feminist doesn't care more about feminism than she or he cares about men and boys. If you can dispose of the label feminism and improve the situation for men and boys, if you're a good feminist, you should do that. And disposing of the label, taking away the credibility of these other feminists who are doing these horrible things, will actually advance the cause of men and boys, because you stop sheltering them. And it's just, I wanted to thank Kai. Unfortunately, we had a lot of noise on your line, so I did have to mute you. But thank you for calling in. And Karen is jumping up and down. So
no, I just wanted to say, honestly, it doesn't even necessarily have to do with men and boys. What it has to do with is a realistic view of reality, right? Like, if you are able to actually view reality on its own terms in an objective way, then patriarchy theory and all of that other crap, that is just that's the equivalent of Scientology, right? It should be easily rejected, and you should be rejecting the name. You should be gagging as you reject it, because it's that disgusting to you to be associated with those kinds of extremely false, extremely tenuous, extremely ethereal, and extremely unfalsifiable and demonstrably false beliefs, right?
And unscientific beliefs, lacking in reason. But
yeah, totally.
I want to move on to the next caller. Luke, you're on the air.
Oh, hi, is that me?
Yep, that's you.
Hi.
Does it sound like you?
Sorry?
Does it sound like you?
It sounds like me, yeah. I was just listening to what your last caller said. I'm a socialist. I'm a Trotskyite, and we are very, very, very quick to draw the distinction between us and other socialists. To confuse us with a Stalinist position, we'd get very upset with that very quickly. Do you know what I mean? And so it would be very upsetting for me to hear someone describe themselves as a feminist and go, oh, well, I don't think that. But you didn't start by drawing the line between you and the other. You left that door open. You gave cover to them and, made it sound like you're all one group. And now that they've said something you don't like, now you want to distance yourself from them. Well, you can't have that. You've got to start from the beginning. You've got to make it clear, and you've got to really actively speak out against what it is about their position that you don't like. You know what I mean? If you're going to wear their mantle, you've got to do everything you can to go, they don't represent me. Please don't lump me in with them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There's also, you were talking about all women can get all men. This just isn't true. I've seen this happen over and over again. The girls will go into a bar, low cut top, short skirt, and just sit there and get no attention. And then they'll start going up to guys, and the guys will sort of pull away from them. I always thought that ugly women were like unconfident men. They're screwed. They've no hope whatsoever, because the instant way that people judge the sexual value of a woman is a visual thing. You know what I mean? If she hasn't got those visual elements, you're not interested, and there's not really much she can do after that.
Well, the reality is that for every ugly woman, there's an ugly guy, right?
Yeah.
In my experience, the so-called ugly women are actually ignoring guys who are in their
level.
Yeah.
Yeah, but their only hope really isn't with the ugly guy; it's with the unconfident guy. Because a confident ugly guy can get.
Well, I mean, but that's the woman's definition of ugly.
Okay.
Is that's her definition of unattractive, is a lack of confidence, and it isn't even as you sort of put it that any woman could get any guy. No. But if a woman of whatever level of attractiveness walks up to 10 guys in a bar and says, "You want to go fuck?" There's a 90% chance that she's going to be able to have sex that night. There just is. And she doesn't have to buy him drinks, and she doesn't have to flirt, and she doesn't have to, do whatever. It's the very, very bottom, maybe 5 to 10% of women who are not going to be able to ever get laid. I
think you're right there that it's more true of women, but it's not. It's not an absolute. There are a lot of women who I've known have gone through multiple year dry spells despite throwing themselves.
Oh well, yeah, but I mean, were they willing to bang the guy who starred in the Centipede 2, the Human Centipede 2?
Oh,
I mean, they weren't.
I've seen that, but yeah, no, they throw themselves at everyone. There actually is a bottom drawer where they're sort of you're almost in the unbeatables.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh no, I've seen that one. Also, there's a myth that all women are good in bed, and me and a friend of mine, we laugh about this quite a lot. We say, no, it's a spectrum. There's a very clear, you know what I mean?
That's such a load of crap. All women are good in bed. According to the standard, the man does all the work. Sure.
Yeah, well, women are just supposed to be there, right? That's that's all they bring to the table. But did you have anything that was related to the show topic that you wanted to bring to the table?
Yeah, sorry. It's just because of the other conversations. I think you were right about the sort of it's the ideological premise of feminism. Basically, boils down to men bad, women good, men are oppressing women. So you can have men raping men, That's fine ideologically. Women raping women, okay, that's possible. Men raping women, of course, that makes sense. But as soon as you've got a woman raping a man, that ruins that whole mechanism of, you know what I mean? It ruins that whole idea of women.
If it happens with any amount of prevalence, yeah, I think that they would be able to accept it if it was like 3% of all instances, but it's not.
Yeah, exactly. But also, there's what counts as harassment, and this is going to possibly be the closest thing I'm ever going to say to something that's actually sexist. It is slightly different when men and women do it, because men and women are required. Men are required to be sexually aggressive, sexually forward. So if you don't, I remember hitting on a girl, she made it clear she wasn't interested, so I walked away, and she then came up and yelled at me because I didn't continue to pursue her. So it was, and I kind of see her point in our culture. That was my role, and me not playing it. Do you know what I mean? Or am I making no sense?
You're making sense. It's but then why should you be expected? I mean, women have challenged their role, right?
Well, okay. I mean, I see your point, but both me and her are players in context. We are functions of our society. So the way she expects me to behave and the way I expect her to behave, it has a context. I get the feeling you want to move on, but before I go, I called in quite a while ago. I was going to wonder, could anyone do a video on the Lord Renard case?
Not that I know of.
Did you have a video that you wanted to plug at all?
No. I was asking, would any of you be willing to do one on the Lord Renard case?
Well, we could consider it. Unfortunately, we can't really talk too much about it at the moment just because of time issues, but definitely think about it.
Send us some links.
Yeah, thank you for your call.
Thanks so much.
And I'm going to move now to Eric. Eric, you're on the air.
Hi there. Sorry, my voice popped out. Do I have a good reception?
You do.
This will be a problem tonight. Okay, first thing is a completely unrelated question. Was that the patriarchal overlord that was queuing the phone calls?
Oh, you mean James Hoff? No, that was our producer, not our producer, the executive the radio person from A Voice for Men.
Okay, sorry. Similar accent, similar voice. Okay, I come to you tonight with a slightly different view on what's been talked about, hopefully.
Okay.
Rape in the military.
Okay, go ahead.
Within the United States, I'm not so sure about the Canadian system. Rape has been a big flag word in the military over the last year or two. Well, it has for decades, but it's really gotten hot over the last couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
Although they don't necessarily term it rape all the time, it's sexual assault, depending upon the level and et cetera.
Yeah.
But what I get is there is a giant witch hunt in the military right now for anyone who could even be possibly accused of sexual misbehavior. This past summer,
I would expect that. I would expect that because it's one of those issues that's just recently sort of had attention dragged onto it. It was always a problem. Finally, it's being addressed, and it's like child sexual abuse. Once it begins being addressed, then all of a sudden you have this sort of mass hysteria about it. Like with the McMartin case in California and all of these child sex abuse scandals and recovered memory stuff and, 100 people and, over one daycare, 100 people being charged but nobody convicted because nothing actually happened type thing, right?
But, Eric, is there something more that you wanted to say about this witch hunt? Like, did you... Go ahead.
This past summer, I was required to go to, it's called sexual abuse, I can't remember the actual acronym. The military is really good with those things. They give one to everything. But I had to go to Don't Be a Rapist training.
Mm-hmm.
They even gave us playing cards, the Don't Be That Guy propaganda. In my office, I have a deck of Don't Be That Guy cards. They have a website, too.
Okay, before you continue, did they actually address female and male assault at all?
Yes, they did. The actual office that addresses assault on a military post, they addressed it quite beautifully, actually. Surprisingly equal.
Okay.
They came out, they stated, according to our data, not, Ms. Koss's data where it's skewed, they said, according to our data, X number of women will be assaulted while they're in the military.
Mm-hmm.
But the one that was interesting was the lady that was giving the speech stood there and straight out said that on this particular base, there are more male victims than there are female.
Well, that still doesn't necessarily address the idea of female perpetrators, right? I mean, this is the thing. Again, feminists and even traditionalists are willing to acknowledge that men can be raped by other men.
Did they acknowledge that men can be raped by women?
Yes, they did. They acknowledged that men could be raped by women, and they went on to talk about men being raped by men as well. But the one statement they said came out with that was that when it was male on male, it was about power, not sexuality.
Oh, that is
it was
such
control.
Bullshit.
Oh yeah, but we have to. So
it's about both.
Did you have a penultimate point to what you're saying? Because it sounds like it was a good thing. I mean, sexual assault in the military isn't necessarily something that should go unaddressed, and if they're being fair about recognizing that there are male victims, a significant number of male victims of female aggressors in the military, then was there an issue at all? Or?
The issue that I had actually came about a week later. I was required, because of the hot news bit, they were being pressured from above to bring everybody in and speak to them. I was front row center listening to the base general tell me that I was a rapist. Quite frankly, he said, "You're all rapists."
Yeah,
and he has his power. No, not a single woman in the room.
So
they separated us by gender.
So the woman who was giving you the education, the course or whatever, right? She was willing to acknowledge that there are male and female rapists, and didn't basically say all men are rapists. But the man
in
was
charge
like,
of the entire post.
All you motherfuckers, all you guys are all fucking rapists.
And of course, his speech was accompanied by basically. And his speech was accompanied by a PowerPoint which showed image after image of battered, beaten, and bruised women.
Oh my God! No, that is actually traditionalist chivalry right there. That's the it's the strange bedfellows idea. Like feminists are in bed sucking traditionalist dicks, basically, in a lot of different ways.
It's like one step forward, 3 steps back. What the heck were they hoping to accomplish with that?
Honestly, scared straight would be the best idea I could have, because there was also a lot of threat. Go ahead.
Sorry? Well, the reality is that most men won't rape unless they've also been sexually abused at some point in their past or suffered some sort of immense trauma. And what they're doing is they're creating a situation where it's very triggering. Do you understand what I'm saying? So at the very best, they're triggering the guys who are prone to this. It's just total bullshit. They're shaming the guys who are not, and they're actually causing more damage to the guys who are already damaged and might do it, and triggering it. So it's like this is just a wash of nonsense. And it's like, what would this serve? It doesn't serve to scare people straight who would never rape in the first place. And if you're going to further the trauma of people who are already people who are already traumatized, and that's why they're raping, then how does that work? You know what I mean?
Yeah. The only purpose that I could... Go ahead, ma'am. Sorry.
No, so go ahead. Sorry. You're the caller.
The only purpose?
Okay. The only purpose that I could see that it would serve would be to sow distrust between the genders within the ranks.
Yeah, no, and it's not even that they necessarily are even aware that they're doing it, or that that's what they're trying to do. I think that a lot of it is subconscious, and it's intentional, but it's subconscious, right? They don't realize that that's what they're trying to do, or that they're intentionally trying to do that. But I actually think that is one of the things. It's us against them. It's pitting people against each other. It's sowing discord. It's all of that kind of stuff, right? So, yeah.
And that was my ultimate point that I wanted to make.
Well, thank you. It was a good point, and personally I think that it doesn't have any purpose to it except demoralizing men, shaming them, breaking down their sense of self, and
scaring women.
And driving a wedge between the genders. Like I said on Reddit earlier this evening, when I realized that, two things that I realized. One, that men who rape were often subject to sexual trauma in childhood. Not to say that most men who are subject to sexual trauma go on to rape. It's actually a very small minority that do. But that of those who do, they were almost invariably subject to sexual trauma in childhood. So this is a cycle of abuse. And then the other thing that really had an impact on me was learning that in the last 12 months, equal numbers of men and women have been raped according to the CDC. If you use as a definition of rape, forced physical intercourse. So those two pieces of information, as a woman, really freed me psychologically. It was the moment that I realized this, it was like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. And
You're
that
not
weight...
in unique danger?
I'm not in unique danger. Not just I'm not in unique danger, but all the guys around me aren't my enemy. They're actually my allies. They are fellow victims, potential victims, or potentially vulnerable to these predators who are neither male nor female. So I wasn't surrounded by men who were a bunch of predators. I was surrounded by allies who were dealing with the same shit that I was dealing with. And creating this wedge between the genders with these she fears you and throwing up images and saying, of battered women and saying you all are rapists to a bunch of men, all that does is drive the wedge between the genders and removes that sense of, for women, it creates fear where there doesn't need to be fear. And for men, it creates shame where there doesn't need to be shame, when in reality, we're all allies in this, trying to end this cycle of abuse. And with that, I'm going to thank you, Eric, for your very insightful call. And we are at the end of the show.
And that's a perfect note to end it on, actually. It's like the ultimate, perfect, wonderful, penultimate note to end.
Yeah, we're all allies in ending the cycle of abuse. But it is time to give thanks. Thanks to our listeners and our callers, and thanks to our donors as well. And for those of you who are first-time callers, you can access the YouTube archive of our shows through our YouTube channel, which is at www.youtube.com/user/honeybadgerradio. And I want to thank my co-hosts for keeping it real. In particular, I want to thank Janet for coming on the show. She really kept me hopping. I want to thank Phil for animating our ad nearly every week. He didn't do this week. And Europa for his amazing art. James for keeping everything running smoothly. And thanks to Men's Rights Reddit for giving us a sticky every week. Please be sure to check out the link on the shared parenting bill in Canada on our show notes and do whatever you can to support it. Thank you, and good night.
This is Honey Badger Radio, reminding you to take the red